Tuesday is going on. So ladies, if you can, there is a sign-up sheet in the back. If you guys have any questions, you can see Tammy or one of the other ladies who are directly involved with that. Men, deacons, we have a meeting this Tuesday as well, so that's going on at the same time. Also, this is the final week of small groups, so if your small group meets today, on Sunday, this is the last week of that, and then if you have a small group that meets on throughout the rest of the week, like on Monday or Wednesday, Thursday, whatever, this is your last week for that as well. So just keep note of that, and then we're going to be on a hiatus until September, so we'll take a little break, recover, really miss each other, and then have a big warm welcome at the end of September time. So, and then a couple other things just to note, June 16th is going to be the Blessing of the Bikes. If you have any questions about that or what that looks like, there is a flyer on the bulletin board in front of the mailbox. But I hear they have a really awesome lesser of the bikes, giving a little devotional gospel-centered thing. So men or women, if you guys have a motorcycle and you want it blessed, come out so Pastor Rodney can take care of that for you. He's going to touch it, sprinkle with oil, right? That's what you do with a bike, right? You sprinkle it with oil to make it run. So that's June 16th. Just be aware of that. Also, we are in the very, very early stages of thinking about another back-to-school bash. But the thing with that is it took a lot of manpower to set up everything for that, to get people to give their inputs and stuff. So if you are interested in helping out with that, again, this year we're projecting potentially in August to have it again. But we need volunteers. We need people who will help with the planning, with the leadership of that. So if you're involved with that last year and want to join again, awesome. If you weren't and you go, man, I really missed out because it was such an awesome event, come talk to either Pastor Rodney or myself, and we'd be glad to have you be a part of that with the planning. And then we also need somebody who will just kind of help point us in the right direction and to kind of lead the discussions in the right direction as well. So, but we need those people in order to keep this moving forward. And we're partnering with the Methodist Church as well again this year. So really exciting. It was awesome. We saw 400 kids, right? 400 people. Not quite that many. Well, I'm the lead pastor, so I exaggerate numbers. So we saw about 4,000 people. But no, it took a lot of people to do it, and so we're asking for your help and volunteer in that as well. And then Revive, guys, we have the 612 Bethany Camp event tonight. Meet here at the church by 4:45 if you're getting a ride, and then we will head up there, and then parents will be returning around 8:15. The event ends at 7:30, so we'll be back probably around 8:15, 8:30, somewhere around there, depending on how long your kids talk. I mean, that's really what will delay us. But so that's going on. $2. Bring that tonight with yourself. That would be awesome. We do have transportation with our adults who will be able to take the kids and stuff. Parents, also coming up on May 19th, we're going to Get Air in Erie. If your team is wanting to go to that and you don't know if they're signed up or not, please check the student ministry bulletin board in front of the mailboxes. Next Sunday, Mother's Day, little note there, men and kids. Next Sunday, Mother's Day, is the cutoff date to sign up for Get Air. So whoever's on that sign-up sheet, that's who you're going. And that is $23 for the Get Air trip, and then $10 roughly for dinner after that. And then we'll be leaving here and all that good stuff. You can see in the bulletin. Also, last one, I promise. And then Pastor Ronnie will tell you all about the last ones. On the back table over there, there is the 28-day prayer devotional that I talked about last week. A few of you took advantage of that. Again, I want to encourage you, parents, even if you're not a parent of a teen, if you have any kids, eventually they're going to become teens, right? So back on that table is just a really helpful resource that we want to give into your hands to be able to pray for your teen, pray for your kids, to love them. And my challenge is that you were a teen once, and you knew, looking back, how valuable it was to have someone who was intentionally praying for you day in and day out. And so that's what that devotional book is for. So it's just a way for you to intentionally pray and love your teen, maybe in ways that you never thought of before. And teens, if your parents are not here, man, it would be awesome for you just to take that book and hand it to your mom or your dad and say, hey, I want you to do this for me. And you would blow their minds. So that's my challenge to you guys as teens. That's my challenge to you as parents. Grab one of those, use that. Oh, by the way, grandparents, your parenting's never done. So if your grandparent would like to grab one, do that as well. So nobody's excluded. If there are children in your life, you are responsible to pray for them. So that resource is for you. Other than that, we're going to pray, and then we're going to continue in our worship of the Lord this morning. Father God, thank you so much for today. Thank you for this opportunity that we have to come before you, to sing songs of praise and adoration, and Lord, to help to exhort and encourage one another into just singing praises to you. God, I pray that as we prepare our hearts even now to worship you in that format, and to worship you through what will later be in the offering and the giving of the money that you have blessed us with, and even in the preaching of your word and us listening to it. Father, I pray that you would mark this day as a day that we walk away changed people because of what the Spirit will do in our lives. We pray these things in your Son's strong and precious name. Amen.
Good morning. Welcome. Excited to have you here this morning. Are you alive this morning? Are you alive in Jesus? If you are, stand with me this morning as we sing, All Because of Jesus, We're Alive. Giver of every breath I breathe, Author of all eternity, Giver of every perfect thing, to you be the glory. Maker of heaven and of earth, no one can comprehend your worth. and every day you wake up. Saying, thank you, God, for this opportunity and this life that you've given me. And then we go out and live that life completely for you. I believe in the sun. I believe in the risen one. I believe I overcome by the power of his blood. Amen. Amen. I'm alive because he lives. Amen. Amen. Let my song join the one that never ends, because he lives. I was dead in the grave. I was covered in sin and shame. I heard mercy call my name. He rolled the stone away. Amen. Amen. I'm alive because he lives. Amen. Amen. Let my song join the one that never ends, because he lives. I can face tomorrow, because he lives. Every fear is gone. I know he holds my life, my future in his hands. Sing it, amen. 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 I'm alive because he lives. Amen. Amen. Let my song join the one that never ends. Amen. Amen. I'm alive because he lives. Amen. Amen. Let my song join the one that never ends, because he lives. Because he lives. I'm losing my voice because I'm giving it all to him. Sing it out, sing his praises. Christ alone is the only reason why we have to live. He is our cornerstone. He's our rock and our foundation. If it wasn't for him carrying all the way to that cross, we would not be here today. Sing it out. My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. I dare not trust the sweetest frame, but wholly trust in Jesus' name. My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. and share that joy with everyone around you.
So thank you for coming this morning and choosing to worship here at Panama Baptist Church. At this time, we're going to continue our worship to our giving of some of our material stuff that God has given to us, our finances. And just a great opportunity to be able to worship God once again. And so before we do, let us look to the Lord in prayer. Father God, we just thank you so much. Thank you so much for who you are. Thank you, God, for giving us life. A life not to live to ourselves, but a life to live to you. And God, I pray that as we are assembled here this morning, that not only are we just living our life, but we're also worshiping our life to you. And God, what a significant part of this journey. And I pray that not only do we worship in a way that just in this congregation, but also throughout our days, that we are worshiping you. And so, God, I pray that we would use everything that we have, every bit of energy, every bit of resources that you've given to us, the material things that you've given to us, and certainly our finances. God, I pray that you would be honored with those things. And I pray that we would just take a part of those and give them back to you as a sweet-smelling offering to you. God, you are so worthy. And may we demonstrate that to you this morning. Thank you, Father, for who you are. And we pray in the great name, the only name that saves, Jesus. Amen.
Bring me out alive.
Okay, Dan, you didn't dismiss the kids.
K through 3.
There you go. All right. Many of you are familiar with the very popular game show on television called The Family Feud. And I think, if my memory serves me correctly, probably a couple years ago I made an illustration about this game show, but for some reason it comes up again. It works out well for where I'm going. So, the game show, Family Feud, if you're not familiar with it, what they do is they survey 100 people, and they take that survey and they bring it to this game show, and these two teams of contestants are to guess the top answers from that survey that was going on. Well, a few years ago, one of the questions that was put out to these survey people, whoever those people are, the question was this: if someone mentions the king, to whom might he or she be referring? And the top 4 answers were this. 81 people said Elvis Presley. 7 people said God or Jesus. And then interesting how that's a synonymous term even in the secular world here. I thought that was kind of interesting. And then 3 people said Martin Luther King Jr., and then 2 people said the Burger King. Must have been some kids involved with that one, or maybe not. But it's kind of interesting, and I was thinking about this, and I thought that's a good question to ask, but I would like to invert that question. I would like to cause that question to be asked to our hearts this morning. If we were to take that question and honestly and truly look at ourselves inside, deep inside, and be completely honest. And the question was put to you: who sits on the throne of your heart? What king sits on the throne of your heart? And the question would be very interesting, and especially the question would be very effective as it's answered truthfully. It would be very revealing. And I think the answer to that question, however we would answer it, the proof would be in the way that we live our life on a continual basis throughout every moment of every day. Who is the king that sits on the throne of your heart? There is really only one of 2 possible answers to that. And you say, now how can that be? If you were to answer it and answer the question, maybe some religion, maybe some type of philosophy, maybe some type of object, or some type of person. If we were to answer it truthfully like that, that would be one God. Maybe it's yourself. And really that is the answer to that, all of those, is the self. Whether we are chasing after something or someone, it really boils down to self. So is that really one of the gods, or the God that sits on the throne of your heart, or is it the living God? There's only one of 2 answers that you could ever possibly answer with that question, to that question. But this morning we are going to be studying another time in the case of history throughout Israel's life in which they again leave the living God and pursue after other gods. And it was known even to this day in that word called idolatry. Israel was notorious after chasing after other gods. And this morning, God is going to be dealing with Israel through the prophet of Elijah, and probably the most well-known historical account of Elijah's life. If you know anything about Elijah, this is the event that you probably remember, even from the back in the Sunday school days, that you remember Elijah was engaged with. It was the encounter with the prophets of Baal. And so let's look at this in 1 Kings chapter 18. If you're using the Chair Bible, it's on page 299. And this is a very, very long chapter, and we're going to be covering most of it this morning. I get no amen out of that. Like somebody would say amen. Some godly-minded person would say amen to that. There we go. Thank you. Good. We got one or two in the room. Anyway, we're going to be covering, and I'm going to try to keep it moving, and I'll try to get you. Let's just say I'm going to get you out of here before noon. Okay? All right. Let's just call Aaron. You call me out on it. If I don't, you just come up here and drag me off. All right? You got my permission. So, 1 Kings chapter 18. Hopefully you're there by now, and let's look at verses 1 and 2. After many days, the word of the Lord came to Elijah in the 3rd year, saying, "Go, show yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain upon the earth." So Elijah went to show himself to Ahab. Now the famine was severe in Samaria. Now, when you see this, and if you've been studying this, if you've been following the series of Elijah in the past number of weeks now, you see that there is a lot of changes that happen to Elijah's life. It really is the way that you and I go. Changes are part of our life, whether we like it or not. Elijah was facing another one of those changes in his life. And you recall some of the things that he has done just in this past only 3 years. There's been a number of changes, significant changes. He was to initially go and talk to Ahab. Remember that way back chapter 17? And that was the original mission that he was sent on. And he was to tell Ahab that there was going to be no rain or even dew upon the earth. And that was the message that he was to go and send. And go and tell Ahab. After that, God instructed him to go and hide by the brook of Cherith. And then, now he is giving the different direction in which he was to go back to Ahab and to show him something in which he was instructing him to do or to have. And the message was also changed. There was going to be a drought. Now there is going to be rain. Quite the opposite. And we find that in our life. Sometimes we are going in a direction in which God sends us on, and then the direction or the message in which God tells us just changes. And it just changes in our life. And we need to expect that in our life. Ahab was going through another one of his changes in his life. But yet through it all, through all of the changes, God is calling him to stretch his faith again through obedience, trust, and, yes, courage. It's going to take a lot of courage to do what we hear about Elijah is going to do today. Courage. But changes are part of the life, especially for Elijah. He is going to encounter King Ahab face to face once again. And look at what he says. He goes back to Ahab. See how fast we're going down through this chapter? We're already at verse 17. We're going to get out of here before 11:30 if we keep this up. Verse 17, here's what he says. And when you go, and excuse me, wrong verse. And Ahab saw Elijah. Ahab said to him, "Is that you, you troubler of Israel?" So it really wasn't a great encounter. And Ahab really wasn't excited to see Elijah. And remember the problem. The problem is the drought. The drought that God has put upon the land of Israel. Because he was, first of all, getting the attention of King Ahab. But secondly, he was getting the attention even far more than that and greater than that is the people of Israel. And there was devastation. You can imagine the death and the disease that was going on throughout the land of Israel for 3 years of drying, parched land. That was problematic. Ahab pointed his finger to Elijah. "Is that you, you troubler of Israel?" That's really kind of not a very warm welcome that he was giving to Elijah. But what did Elijah say? Well, the next verse tells us, "I'm not the troubler of Israel. You in your father's house, you abandoned the commandments of the Lord and followed after the Baals." And so when you kind of look at this, first of all, if it was the first time you looked at that, you say, there's finger pointing going on here. Kind of like politicians, they're always pointing their finger at one another. And who really is to blame here? Who is? And the people themselves were quite confused at what the problem is, or the problem of the problem. And they didn't know, and they certainly didn't know who the right God was. Who is the God? They were quite confused, and we're going to see this as it plays out as we continue to work down through this chapter. But the drought, as we look at this, it really seems kind of severe, but Ahab was shamelessly disobedient, openly, blatantly disobedient to God. And it caused a very open and blatant and radical act by God to get His attention and the attention of Israel as they turned away from God. As we see this event unfold here in just a moment, remember, we need to keep in mind that this is not a showdown between Elijah and Ahab, but it is between the idolatry within the hearts of men, women, and the nation, and the living God. And so we need to understand that, and we need to understand it very well as we go down through this text. But as we look at this text, we will see that there is a people that are invited to this, if you want to call it a showdown. Maybe that's not a good word to use, but that's the word that popped in my head. But God is using Elijah to assemble this grand gathering together because there is something significant that God was going to do in and amongst the people of Israel. And the invitation is given. And as the invitation is given out to attend to this event, that Elijah is not only rebuking Ahab, but he's also ordering Ahab, the king. He's ordering the king to do something. You go out and you get the prophets of Baal and Asherah and you bring them back here, and we're going to settle this matter once and for all. But notice, if you will, as we look at these verses, the prominence of idolatry. Let me just read down through here. Verse 19. Now therefore send and gather all Israel to me at Mount Carmel, and in the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table. And we'll just go on. So Ahab sent to all the people of Israel and gathered the prophets together at Mount Carmel. And Elijah came near to all the people, and he said, let's stop right there. I know it's in the middle of a sentence. That was not probably good on me to do that. Maybe kind of mean to you. Don't read on. All right, don't. Stop doing that. I see some of you reading on. But there's a prominence of idolatry that's going on within this nation. 850 prophets of Baal and Asherah. Now that is a lot. That is a lot, and it really tells about the condition of Israel and just where their hearts really were. It was scattered. It was just moving in a direction in which was further and further away from God. But Elijah assembles this great population of people. Ahab and Elijah certainly was there. The prophets and the priests of the Baals and Asherahs were there, but also the general public. That's a lot of people that were gathered together throughout this land, and even on the hillsides they would congregate together. Some theologians estimate there were probably thousands of people in attendance to this gathering, but we don't really know. But there were an awful lot of people, no doubt. But the invitation was given out because this is going to be a significant event in the life of Israel. And the message here is going to be given by Elijah to the nation of Israel specifically. And the message as it goes out was not so much to show how big that Elijah is, but to the message of pointing to where their hearts is at. Elijah wanted to win the people back to the one true God. And in the midst of all of these pagan gods that they worship, they were quite confused who really is the real God. And so they needed proof. In their minds, they were confused for generations. They followed after foreign gods, multiple foreign gods. And Elijah calls them away from their polytheism. Verse 21. He says this, let's just pick up where I left off. How long will you go limping between two different opinions? If the Lord is God, follow Him. But if Baal, follow him. And the people did not answer him a word. Polytheism, in case you wondered, it's a compound word of many gods. And that's what they didn't abandon God Himself. And maybe I should differentiate here as we talk about gods. When we look at the Hebrew Bible, it comes in the word form of Yahweh. And so if I was to read out of the Hebrew Bible up here, that's the way that I would translate the Lord God. As you see it translate into your English Bible, it translates into Lord. Capital L, capital O, capital R, capital D. That's the way you see that translate. So when you see that word Lord, you just can automatically say Yahweh in your mind. And so Elijah calls them to differentiate between Yahweh and all of these other gods, in which they added to the mix of all of the gods that they followed after. Now, Yahweh kept continuing to get pushed further and further back on the shelf, and God will not share the shelf, specifically the throne of a heart of an individual, with any other god. He is Lord of everything, or He is not Lord at all. And that's exactly where Israel is at. And Elijah calls them away from their polytheism. And the people had nothing to say to them. Their mind was in an uncommitted, just kind of hanging around a limbo state. And they didn't really know who to follow after. They were confused. They were kind of in a neutral zone. If you've ever been in a neutral zone, you know what I'm talking about. Maybe even as you drive your vehicle. This past week I was able to get the motorcycle out. And just enjoy doing that, and you just get away from shifting, because the cars are mostly automatic these days, and getting kind of lazy. And I go down on the motorcycle, and I got to shift gears, which is okay. It's kind of cool on a motorcycle, But here I go, just cruising around, and I was going down a hill, and before I kicked it into another gear, or so I thought, and as I went down to the bottom of the hill, I thought everything was okay. And as I went down to the bottom of the hill and I started going on the upper side of the hill, and I realized I was in neutral. I don't know, that's not stupid. And maybe I shouldn't be telling my motorcycle stories to you. And that's not a cool thing, I should be able to shift. I've been riding them for 40 years. You think that I could shift right. But anyway, here I was in neutral, and I was trying to look for the power. It's like, whoa, what was going on? The engine was cranking, but there was no torque to the wheels to get me to moving where I needed to go. That's really where Israel was at. God, Yahweh, was always there. He never left them. But when they were looking for the real God, they weren't engaged. It wasn't engaged with the engine. They were just kind of moving along with the population, with the way that other people were following after. They were just moving along, just kind of going with the flow. But yet when they were really looking for the power in their life, it wasn't there. Their God was not engaged in their life. And so God calls them, tries to get their attention, and they didn't know how to answer. They just didn't know. They didn't answer him at all with anything. So there Elijah was with this whole population of people, seemingly alone. And he was there with a king, a really wicked king, a king that really turned away from the Lord. As a matter of fact, the way that he's described back just a chapter ago, that he was the most evil king in the sight of God up to that point in their history. He did more evil than all the other kings. He was a wicked man. He left God and he started pursuing all of these other idols and dragging the nation of Israel down the tubes with him. And so here Elijah is standing face to face with this wicked king, also with these pagan priests and prophets, and also this nation full of idolatry worshiping people. And you can imagine that crowd just continuing to funnel themselves into what was happening there. Not only were they requested to come by the king, as we had just read, but they were also, maybe they didn't get the message, but they would see the perhaps thousands of people moving over to the hillside. Like, what is going on? What's the attraction? What's going on over there? And just to remind you, that was before telephone, before cell phones, before text messaging. You couldn't say, hey, what was going on over there? I'm not going over. I got to do my hair, and that sort of thing. It wasn't anything like that. They saw people going over. You wanted to know what was going on. You get your shoes on or your sandals and go over there and find out what's going on. And quickly they could see that there was quite a stage that was being set to whatever was happening. And so here Elijah is. Even amongst all of these people, I can imagine all the statues and shrines to all of these pagan gods that was just littering the landscape. But this is what Elijah was called to do. This was the job that God has given him to do. And by the way, that wasn't something that he was given to do just right out of the chute. It was given to him in a course of time. God was working and molding and developing this man over a period of time, tempering him, putting him through the refinery to bring him to the point where he could stand in a setting such as this. And this is what God has called him to do. The grand stage has been prepared. But then we see the trials by fire. And I'm going to read a significant amount of the text to you, because the text renders it just very clearly and concisely to what is happening here. And so allow me the time just to read this portion of Scripture to you. It's rather fascinating. Verse 22 through 39. Then Elijah said to the people, I, even I, am left a prophet of the Lord. But Baal's prophets are 450. Let 2 bulls be given to us, and let them choose 1 bull for themselves, and cut in pieces, and lay it on the wood, and put no fire to it. And I will prepare the other bull, and lay it on the wood, and put no fire to it. And you call upon the name of your God, and I will call upon the name of the Lord. And the God who answers by fire, he is God. And all the people answered, it is well spoken. Verse 25. Then Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, choose for yourself 1 bull and prepare it first, for you are many, and call upon the name of your God, but put no fire to it. And they took the bull that was given to them, and they prepared it, and called upon the name of Baal from morning until noon, saying, O Baal, answer us! But there was no voice, and no one answered. And they limped around the altar that they had made. Verse 27, and at noon Elijah mocked them, saying, cry out loud, for he is a god. Either he is musing, or he is relieving himself, or he is on a journey, or perhaps he is asleep, and he must be awakened. And they cried aloud and cut themselves after their custom with swords and lances until the blood gushed out upon them. And as midday passed, they raved on until the time of the offering of oblation. But there was no voice. No one answered. No one paid attention. Stop right there. So you see the setting that was happening here, the situation. These prophets were allowed to go first, and Elijah, before he does that, he sets out the terms of the conditions of what was going to happen to the people. And they were established and agreed upon by both sides. And they were to take both the altars and they were to set them up in basically the same fashion. And they were to then call upon their God, and that their God was to light the fire underneath this altar. And then that God would be deemed as the God. The God. And it seemed very fair to the audience in which was around them. Now, in the translation I just read from, the ESV, the English Standard Version, it translates this word as limped. The New International Version translates it as danced. The New American Standard Bible translates it as leaped. And any one of those is within the sphere of translation, and it is acceptable to what is rendered here in the text. And so you can imagine as these Baal worshipers established and set up their altar, that they were then beginning to cry out and holler out and scream and dance to try to get the attention of their God. And as Elijah pointed out to them, that maybe he's asleep, or maybe he went to the restroom. That's literally how that translates. Maybe he went to the, pretty much, he went to the bathroom. And that's what it says in the text here. Or maybe he's on a journey. Or maybe he's asleep and you have to wake him up. Maybe something like that is happening. You know, you have to really holler and dance. Go ahead, really kick it up here, because he's away somewhere and you got to get his attention. Really, the mockery is all pointing to, he's not much of a God, is he? If he is a God at all. That's what Elijah's saying to him. And so after a half a day, or more than a half a day, that this was carrying on, they realized that the point was not getting done. There was no fire being lit underneath that altar. But yet, after all of that, now the stage is going to be set for Yahweh to show himself strong. And look at what happens here in verses 30 through 39. Then Elijah said to all the people, "Come near to me." And all the people came near to him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord that had been thrown down. And Elijah took 12 stones according to the number of tribes of the sons of Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord came, saying, "Israel shall be your name." And with the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord. And he made a trench about the altar as great as would contain 2 seahs of seed, which is a total about 14 quarts. And he put the wood in order and cut the bull in pieces and laid it on the wood. And he said, "Fill 4 jars with water and pour it on the burnt offering and on the wood." Verse 34. And he said, "Do it a second time." And they did it a second time. And he said, "Do it a third time." And they did it a third time. And the water ran around the altar and filled the trench also with water. And at the time of the offering of the oblation, Elijah the prophet came near and said, "O Lord, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known this day that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and that I have done these things at your word." Verse 37. "Answer me, O Lord, answer me, that this people may know that you, O Lord, are God, and that you have turned back their hearts." And then the fire of the Lord fell and consumed the burnt offering and the wood and the stones and the dust, and licked up the water that was in the trench. And when the people saw it, they fell on their faces and said, "The Lord is God. The Lord, He is God." And Elijah said to them, we'll stop right there. I'll leave verse 40 for later. Sorry, I got into the reading. Calling out of Elijah. Stop reading. Stop reading verse 40. The first thing Elijah did was he repaired the altar of the Lord. That's sad. That really is sad. That shouldn't have had to been done. But that really speaks again to just how people left Yahweh years ago. Maybe even generations ago. They no longer worshiped the Lord, their God. And they had to repair the altar. I also want to point out, in my translation here, is the word jars of water. The jars. It comes from the Greek, the Hebrew word kade. And it also can be translated as pitcher. And maybe in your translation it says that. Either one of those would be obviously a good, accurate translation. And some theologians I have heard, even as I was studying this, they use the word barrel. And I think that's an infatuation of the word that's being used here. I think jars and pitcher is really the proper translation. But they were used, those 4 jars, and they were to fill them up, and they were to douse the altar, the sacrifice, the altar, all the wood, everything with this water. And they did it 3 times. So I think what the I think what some theologians are trying to articulate, and they do it probably not in the best of way, is to really articulate just how well this sacrifice was saturated with water. That's what's being known here, and that's what needs to be communicated. There was absolutely no possible way that you could light this altar, this wood up with fire. No way. Even if Elijah was into some type of trickery, little sleight of hand, maybe he had a hot ember behind his back some way, somehow, and he kind of slipped it underneath the altar, and kind of, as he was kind of praying out to God, just slipped the hot ember underneath the altar, and he could have done it that way. No, he didn't do it that way. God wanted to make sure that only he was going to get the credit for this. There was no possible way that this altar could be lit, even from a human standpoint. And I like that because this is exactly where God likes to put himself, time and time and time again, even today. The impossible situations, that's where he likes to really show up. He really likes to make it so that you and I clearly know who truly is God, who really is Lord. And that's what was being articulated here. God wanted to show himself strong, and he did it. Elijah's simple prayer of faith. There was no pleading, no dancing around, no hollering, no screaming, nothing of that sort. He just simply has a prayer of faith to God. God not only answers and brings fire down from heaven, but also, and more significantly, he turns the hearts of the people back to God. He really is God. And he demonstrates that in a very strong way. And then we come to verse 40 that some of you already read. And Elijah said to them, "Seize the prophets of Baal, and let not one of them escape." And they seized them, and Elijah brought them down to the brook of Kishon and slaughtered them there. We live in a day where this type of action is unacceptable. We live in a day where capital punishment is being further and further gotten away from. And we don't do that in our humane society. Well, that didn't sound right, did it? But we do it in humane society. Maybe some of you shouldn't know that. But we live in a society where we like to populate our prisons and just let the mass murderers and the serial killers continue to carry out their time and eventually turn them loose. And we live in a culture like that. But back in the day, and as you read through the Old Testament, we see God's system is a little bit different. God has capital punishment in his system. And this is what is actually being done. And when we read this, we think, oh my goodness, that's horrible that they would take all of these people, these hundreds of people, down to the brook and they would literally practice capital punishment, slaughter them. But think of it this way. If you had a tumorous, fast-growing cancer in your body, something you really wouldn't want in your body, and it was there wherever, and it was there, and you knew it was there, you saw the x-rays, and you would be telling the doctor, "Doctor, get that thing out of me, quick! I don't want it spreading any further, anymore. Get it out. Get rid of it." And that's exactly what's happening in the life of Israel. There were these prophets that were literally killing people by their idolatry practice. And that was just populating throughout the nation of Israel, drawing them further and further and further away from God. And that cancer had to be removed out of the nation of Israel by God himself's instruction. And he orders Elijah to do just that, and he does. That's how serious God takes idolatry. God will have no other God in your life besides him. He will not take a seat next to another God in the throne of your heart. We need to realize that. We need to come to grips with that. And we need to allow that to be seen, see for ourselves and others who really is on the throne of our hearts. It really is significant, folks. So let me just kind of pull this down to you here for an application. We live in a country, you know, I always talk about this country because we're one of the country, right? We're one of the many populations, and we're part of this culture, this society in which we live in, and rightfully so. But when we look at this culture, when we look at the things that are going on, we see a type of philosophy that continues to continue to grow on. It's just kind of a subtle thing that continues to happen in our world, and we just sit back rather passively. It's the culture that which, you know, you have the right to go and worship whatever God you want to. And I understand that's kind of like in the Constitution type thing. You're free to worship, all right? But yet, when we, as believers in Christ, that we are absolutely firmly convinced who really is God, we want to share that with our friends and our neighbors, our families, right? That's the most loving thing that we could do. Really show them who God is. Just like Elijah did. He really is God. He is Lord. There is no other. All of those other gods, small g, they're really nothing. And we talked about that when we studied 1 Corinthians. Remember that? And so we're living in this culture that continues to indoctrinate us that, you know, you have your religion, you have your religion, you have your religion. That's okay, but you know what? Just leave other people alone. Don't even share. Just let them be. Just let them go. Just let them be as they are. And so we live in a time in our culture where wavering and not really being committed to is commonplace. You just kind of like go with the flow and just don't make any ripples. Just kind of move along and mind your own business and just leave your religion or your worship to whatever God to yourself. Do whatever brings fulfillment to our own self-centered cravings and desires. Whatever gods that you want to worship that really does it for you, that's the God you need to worship. You see that culture that we live in? It's really moving in that direction, and it's almost to the point where it's picking up such a momentum that it's really becoming problematic, even in a greater way. But yet when we see this passiveness in our life, in our culture today, it really is affecting our churches in our country. I don't know if you get around the country or if you talk to pastors around the country, but you see this type of mentality that's drifting back into churches. This type of just let people alone, just kind of be passive with the way that we worship and the way that we go about our relationship with the Lord. And it really is, again, problematic, not only in our country, but also in our relationship with God. I don't know if you see that. I don't know if you're really paying attention to that. I'm not going to step on any toes. I'm tempted to spell some things out. But all you have to do is pay close attention to who's attending. All you have to do is pay attention to the different ministries of who really is passive. All you have to do is who's really serious in their passion to know God, to spend quality, quiet time alone with God. To spend hours in the week praying to God. To find that quiet place to know Him. And I fear that we as a country, as an American church, just continues to be passive even in our relation, especially in our relationship with God. It's not anything new. It's happened down through the ages. As a matter of fact, in the Word of God, it addresses those types of attitudes and philosophies. It's called, one word, it's called lukewarm. The book of Revelation, the very last book in the Bible, there are 7 churches that are spelled out for us, and many theologians will agree, and I agree with them, that all the churches in the church age can be characterized in one of those 7 churches. And as you get to one church in particular, the Church of Laodicea, which I think is very much like an American church, they are pegged as being lukewarm. Jesus Himself says to them, I know your works. You are neither cold nor hot. Would you that you were either cold or hot? So because you are lukewarm, and there's the word, and neither hot nor cold, I will spit you out of my mouth. That seems kind of a figurative part of speech that he's talking about. It's not that we're in God's mouth and he spits us out, but it's the closeness of God. No longer is his presence around you. He turns away. And that's not a place that I want to be. It's not a place where you should want to be. And we find ourselves neither cold nor hot many a times in that area called lukewarm. And maybe many people can be categorized like that. Well, I do lukewarm stuff. You know, I come most of the time on Sunday and throw a couple bucks in the plate, and I might even bring my Bible on occasion. Yeah, you know, that's where I'm religious. But am I committed? Is that my life? Is that really where my heart is at? Do I really know who sits on the throne of my heart? It doesn't really look like God does. When you're lukewarm, God really doesn't sit on the throne of your heart. There's something else. And folks, may I say to you today, this is the time. If there was ever a time to be committed, is now. The time to be committed and turn from your gods is now. And you say, well, I don't have any idols hanging around. Well, look, I don't have any of those little Buddha things around my house or all those figurines. I don't have any of that stuff around. Look a little closer. Look a little closer. Look at how you're spending your resources of your life. Look at your pursuits. Look at when you filter the decisions that you make in your life. Is it based upon the desires of your heart and what you want to do and what you feel like doing? Or is it really committed to God? You know, I really feel like staying home and watching TV this morning. But you know what? I'm committed. I'm committed, and I kick that out of my mind, and I say, no, God, strengthen me. Strengthen me. I need to be around your people. I need to be a place where they're reading God's Word, that's studying God's Word, that's understanding God's Word, because I need that for my life. I'm going to make the right choice based upon your Word, because you are the one that sits on the throne of my heart. And I make decisions like that throughout the course of the week. I'm going to pursue this ministry, and I'm going to pursue this thought. I'm going to pursue this avenue based upon your word. I know your instruction, and I'm going to do that. Even though I want to do this, I'm going to do this because you are the one that sits on the throne of my heart. Folks, today is the day we need to waken up out of our slumber, out of our going with the flow, and just kind of kicked in neutral and just doing whatever the population says. And we need to stand strong as Christians. Now is the time to waken out of that slumber. And may I just close with the words from Elijah himself. If the Lord Yahweh is God, follow him. Would you stand? Close in a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you once again for your word. Thank you for stirring our hearts, our minds, to understanding that you are God. There is no other. And that we are called to follow after you, to be passionate in our life, to follow you, to be serious about the things that we are doing, and not allow ourselves to go with the flow. Oh God, speak to our hearts, empower us, move us in that direction. Oh God, you are to be worshiped and followed after. And may we do that today. May you be firmly fixed on the throne of our heart today and for the rest of our life. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. You're dismissed.